Welcome to episode 2 of No Nerds, No Problem. Today's guest is Sahil Khosla, master of all things no-code. We're going to be exploring the massive ecosystem that no-code has become, including diving deep on some of the tools that you, as a non-technical founder, can use to build your startup. Everything from app builders to workflow automation to data collection and analysis. Enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome to No Nerds, No Problem. Today on the show, we have Sahil Khosla. Sahil, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Today, we're going to be talking about all things no-code, which is super exciting for me. My background is engineering. I am a coder. This no-code thing is something that I've always wanted to learn more about. And Sahil is one of the experts on no-code. So we're really excited to have you here today.
Yeah, likewise. It's been an interesting journey to see how no-code has exploded over the last couple of years. I think the concept has been around for many, many years, but the term has sort of caught on in the last couple of years, and it's just like off the roof right now. So excited to talk more about it.
We were talking with Jared Robin a couple days ago, founder at Rev Genius, and one of the things that we talked about is what you just said, right? This concept of no code has existed. He's used quite a few no code solutions for his business,
right?
But when we say no code, we also mean Google spreadsheets, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What kind of things can you tell non-technical founders on that side?
Yeah, so actually, I did a post about like the history of no code, and I laid out like all the tools that have come over the years, which people might not have realized, but are actually no-code tools. Because the point is, all these tools are a means to an end. You're trying to get a product out, or you're trying to solve a problem at the end of the day. And there's several ways to solve these problems. Now, obviously, people are also saying something like Loom is a no-code tool, which I a little bit disagree. So I like to explain it as something that you would have otherwise had to write code for, but now you can do without writing code is kind of a no-code tool for me. And in that history post that I did, I mentioned the year when Microsoft Excel was launched. And I said that was really the true beginning of the no-code sort of journey. Because if you think about it, you can do so much in Excel. You can build a full dashboard. You have because when you're building sort of a tool, you have some kind of an input, you have some kind of data processing, and then you have some kind of an output. And you can do that in Excel, whether it be entering the numbers in a table and then publishing a graph, like as simple as that.
Right.
And obviously, Excel is very powerful. You can do a lot more things in that. So that really, I think, people sort of miss what the journey has been, what the history has been, and how it has been around for a long, long time. I actually myself didn't realize that I've used a no-code tool many years ago. It was in my first job actually, and we used a tool from Oracle. It was the Oracle Application Development Framework, and it was very like drag and drop. And you had these pre-built things, and you had like database connectivity, all sort of in a very like a UI wizard. And then you could customize, like it would create an application for you, and then you could customize it. So now that when I got involved in no code, like more recently, I realized, oh, wait a second, that tool that I used all these years ago was a no code tool, and I didn't even like realize. So things have been around, but now it's really sort of catching the buzz and getting a little bit mainstream. I think there was a New York Times article yesterday on no code.
real mainstream then if it's in the Times, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think a lot of first-time founders, early stage founders can get very caught up in this concept of a product, and they want this kind of perfect packaged, delivered experience. But your customers don't care if your product is a hodgepodge of Notion docs, Google spreadsheets. Like they don't need an app in the App Store, right?
And you're exactly right. People, users just want their problem solved, and how you solve it, really, they could not care less. If you can give them it in a cohesive sort of fashion, it doesn't matter if it's coming in the browser, if it's coming in the App Store. people will go to the place where their problem can get solved.
Exactly.
So even if it's like, as you said, a Notion doc or a Notion page, even that works if you have solved it in a way where, the users can benefit from it.
When I started at Google, I had come from a product design and development background, and
Mhm.
I got thrown into this role as a solutions engineer. Which, as a solutions engineer, you're not a product engineer; you're a solution engineer.
Right.
And the majority of our software, we use Google Spreadsheets as an interface. It's a
Right.
perfect. A spreadsheet is a perfect interface. You can get so many varied types of input. You can do so much with it. We had some code backing it, but for the most part, that code was just taking things, going and checking something on the web, pulling data, and then spitting it back into the spreadsheet. And so it was a big shift for me because I wanted to be, designing and I wanted to be packaging things, but delivering the solution, that's all our customers cared about in that role. And that's really all any customer cares about.
No, that's absolutely right. We would tend to get caught up in, as you said, making it pixel perfect, and designing that best package without even validating or understanding if it's even solving the problem that the customers are facing. Which actually brings me to another interesting point about no code and the whole movement around citizen developers. So why that's important and why that's key is because in a typical enterprise, if a business user, say it could be a person from the marketing team or the HR team or you name it, right? Anyone outside of engineering, if they have a problem that, or not even a problem, if they have a workflow, for example, that could be made more efficient or could be, done in a way where if they had an app or some kind of an interface that they could use, would really make their lives easy or make their, end-to-end workflow more efficient. So they could think about, approaching the IT or the engineering team that, hey, like this is something that we do on a daily basis. It would be nice if, we could automate this in a way or build an app where, I can click a button and this thing happens, so I don't have to do it manually every day. So now in this concept, in this context, if you think about, they would have to approach this, another team, then explain the requirements to them, make a pitch for what they want solved, and then all of a sudden they're becoming a stakeholder, and
Hmm.
then engineering has to carve time out and then actually do it. And you know how long that takes to even pitch a product, get it approved, get it funded, and then shipped. Now, if we sort of change that a little bit and bring no code in this discussion, the the whole development process can be brought directly to the business user,
Right.
and they can solve it for themselves. The UI might not look pretty, and that's not the point because they will put the knobs and the switches and the buttons where they need them, right? And
Right.
they don't have to explain it to anyone else uh, how they would like it because developers don't understand their context and they have to go through all this discussion. But if the business user could do it themselves, then they would put it exactly where it should be because they know how they use it on a daily basis. So the user becomes the developer in a way.
Yeah, it's you mentioned this whole process of taking requirements, bringing them to an external team, becoming a stakeholder, getting that team to understand your context. One of the things that we talk about a lot in our process is the further you can get along that process before you start spending money, or if you're in a company inside of a company before you start spending other teams' time, the
Right.
better off the end result's going to be. It's tough as someone who's a non-technical individual to describe products in a way that technical people can build. If you're able to get a version done yourself and you bring it to someone like me, it's so much easier for me to go, "Oh, okay, cool. I totally see what you're doing here. Here's how we can upgrade this now that we're going to a coded version."
Right, right, exactly. And that ties nicely with that discussion about using no code to maybe validate your idea, bring it to a certain level, and then if it makes sense to kind of upgrade it to maybe something that's more flexible than a typical no code tool.
So that's a great segue into another question I wanted to ask you. What sorts of projects or products do you see as great fits for no code solutions?
Yeah, great question. So automation definitely has been, coming on top of the list in a lot of discussions that I've been having. And so one is sort of workflow automation. Obviously, there's a typical thing that you do on a daily basis. Maybe you get a list from somewhere, then you parse out the email addresses, and then you put it in another system, or you have to run a check. Um, so these kind of things where really there's no decision making involved, or maybe even if there's some kind of trivial kind of decision making involved, and can save you a ton of time by automating, that really is a no brainer. Obviously, yeah. So there's some concerns there with, like, will the IT team allow, or the security team allow, integrating with this third party tool, or do all the tools that you use, all the SaaS products do you use, integrate well with this automation system, something like a Zapier. So definitely you have those kinds of questions that will come up, but as things are moving, especially in the startup world and the tech world, as things are moving more and more towards the cloud, chances are that you use SaaS products that already integrate with some of these automation tools. And these automation tools are also working hard day and night to ensure that they work well with some of the most popular tools out there. So for example, the whole Google Suite is available on Zapier. Notion is available on Zapier, right? So you have some of these widely adopted tools available on these automation platforms already integrated. So you definitely can move ahead with those. Other than that, I think the next thing that comes to mind is internal tools, as I mentioned. Maybe if you're an established organization, uh, there's this discussion about how innovation comes to a complete stop because you've grown too big to innovate in a way that used to serve you as a startup.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a little bit of the introduction of no code in that space where, okay, instead of me spending time on building a deck to propose a project, in that same amount of time, I'm just gonna do the project and build an MVP, run it, by people internally. Hey, what do you think of this concept? So there's that innovation piece, and then definitely internal tools, which I started talking about, but jump to innovation. The internal tools piece, I think, is very important because there's so many processes even today that are still being done in a traditional way, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're just doing it, in a spreadsheet somewhere, and it's hard to parse the data. Whereas you could quickly build a tool which all your staff can use and makes the data available in a very, like, visually appealing way, and then information is available exactly where you need it, and some of the work can be done by some click of these buttons. So internal tools definitely is another one, and then third, obviously, is if you're starting a new product from scratch, internally or externally, or if you're a new company altogether, you want to build a startup. How do you validate your idea?
Mm-hmm.
Typically, people have gone to developers, and spend a lot of money, and then you have to raise funds. But maybe with no code, that completely changes, where you can build it for pretty much no money, just your time and energy, and then you can start validating.
One of the things we talk a lot about in our our materials and our process is validating offers. And to validate an offer, you don't necessarily need a functioning product. So with no code, sure, maybe you can't build exactly the product you have envisioned. Maybe, you want to do this super cool location tracking app where it connects to people. That's going to be tough with no code, but you could test the core value prop with no code. And that's something that I think, just because you have this big vision that maybe is too big for no code, maybe not, you should go try it for sure. That
Right.
doesn't mean there's not something that you can break off. Another thing that you mentioned in there that I think is really funny just from personally, I'm a technical person. I've got a team now of 22 technical people on at No Nerds. Well, I use a lot of no code tools because it's easier for me, even as a developer, even as someone who could sit down and code pretty much anything I wanted to. We use Zapier, like you mentioned, with a
Hmm.
Google spreadsheet. It hooks into a Google spreadsheet
Right.
for our
Right.
sales automation. And then we hook in a
Yeah.
Lemlist, which is a mailing automation. So that's a no code piece of software. I've got my a team member of my team that drops leads into a spreadsheet. when they're ready, she changes one of the columns. That hits Zapier. Zapier takes that, sticks it in the lem list. Like, we do that because, look, I could code that, but why would I? It took me
Absolutely.
an hour to set that up.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all a means to an end. And I tell people, and I joke around that I'm I'm a developer, but I'm really lazy. Like, if I can do something,
Yeah.
if I can do something quickly, I am going for that, code or no code. Like, okay, yeah, I love writing code, but you also have to be smart about the tool you are selecting for the job you're doing. Maybe you have to pick the right tool for the job, and most of the time is of essence, and time is money. So why would I go about it the long way if I can get it done the quicker way? And as you said, a lot of my personal work I could get done with no code. I'm getting to a point where a lot of ideas come to my head, and it used to be that, oh, maybe I could do that in React, or maybe I could do that in this framework. But now it's like, let's just keep that aside. Let's not jump the gun here. Let's see what no code tool I can use to bring an MVP forward, and then we'll worry about anything else after.
I love the phrase you used earlier, citizen developer.
Right.
Um, it's it's making you as a non-technical individual, it returns your agency. You are a citizen of this process. And so it's not, you're
Mhm.
no longer dependent on, oh man, I would really love to get the site updated. I would really love to improve my marketing automation, but my tech team or my tech partner or the agency that I use, they're too expensive. It's going to take too long. They've got too many other things. Being able to take back control as someone who may feel out of control in this world of tech, that's huge too.
No, absolutely. I read a stat somewhere. I think only maybe even less than 1% of the entire workforce is technical in the sense it knows how to code.
Hmm.
So think about that for a second. Like, that's a lot of people who don't come close to code and are missing out on so much opportunity that us developers, like for us, it's very easy to go, oh, I just grabbed this giant list from somewhere. I'm going to go write a script to parse it and get exactly the data that I need. For me, it's a no-brainer. I can go do that. But someone who's non-technical, they don't have that capability, and traditionally they have been limited in what they can do and how efficient they can be in their work. But that's going to change, and the more people who are able to solve their own problems using the technology, the better it is overall. Whether it's a startup, whether it's a big company, it just makes everyone more efficient, and it allows people to bring their ideas to light. Because, as I said, business users have a lot of ideas,
Hmm.
but they don't know how to build them, and this changes that.
Yeah, there's no shortage of vision out there, and there's no shortage of problems that need solving internally and externally.
Mhm.
Empowering people to have the tools and have the skills to go answer those problems is huge.
Absolutely, and I think training is also going to become a huge component of that, because a lot of time and money is spent on training employees, but I don't know how many of those trainings actually see a tangible outcome.
Hmm.
Uh, this is one place where if uh, you know companies sign up with someone who can provide this kind of training to their employees, where they've never seen code, they've never written code, they haven't come close to code, but they have these ideas that they want to either build or just by observing, just by power of observing on a day-to-day basis, you see that, okay, there's a gap here. There could be a tool, because people are savvy enough. They've used the apps at this point. They've used website at this point for years. So they're savvy enough to identify this could be an app or this could be a tool. So if you enable them by giving them the basic, vocabulary, basic knowledge of how to bring something from, idea to a real tangible product, um, that could, unlock a lot of opportunity for people and actually make them feel empowered, because uh, one core concept, like core element of job satisfaction, is feeling empowered, and this could also help with that.
There's a cultural shift in there too, I think, in that you need to
Mhm.
be comfortable as a business leader to empower your employees and to trust them to make these decisions. I
Right.
love what you're saying because I've also never, I was thinking about this conversation before we had it, and I was thinking about it in
Mhm.
context of what can a non-technical founder do early on to leverage no code. But that's the wrong question because this is something that you can continue to leverage. It's not just for your product. It's also something, even after you've got, you've raised $100 million and you have a team of 30 engineers building your product, you can still leverage these tools to innovate internally and to move a little bit faster.
Oh, 100%. Like whether it's a product manager or a project manager, whether it's marketing, everyone has a role to play. Like I know, the marketing person at where I work right now, she was able to automate this workflow to post on LinkedIn. She actually schedules her posts in Monday.com, and then it's connected through Zapier, and then it goes through. She flips, as you said, she flips a switch, like she flips a column,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think it's when she puts a date on it, then it gets scheduled that it will get posted on LinkedIn. So she did all of that on her own.
Cool.
She is not a developer, but she was able to build this workflow using Zapier. So that's huge. Now she doesn't have to go to LinkedIn at 8:30 a.m. on Monday when she has 10 other things going on. The post is already scheduled. Yes, you can use a tool to schedule these, but not all tools are going to fit exactly your use case out of the box. And that's where this flexibility and using the Lego blocks help, because she wanted to do it through Monday.com. So, okay, fine, go build it because Monday integrates with Zapier, and there you have it. So definitely, it's not just for product, not at all. Product is just one aspect of it. It's overall workflow and just your work.
We've been talking a lot about the positive aspects and all the opportunities present with no code, but I want to flip it around.
Mm-hmm.
With your experience, what are the mistakes that you see people making a lot? What are the places that people get into trouble with no code?
Yeah. One thing, so actually, this is funny because this just happened yesterday. I think Bubble announced a change to their pricing structure, and then all of a sudden, the entire Bubble community, everyone who has an established product on Bubble, was taken aback. That wait a second, what's going on here? And I think the change was that they went from X number of things allowed in the DB to a very low number, which would have costed a lot more to people who are relying on the Bubble platform. So there, obviously, what I noticed was that most people have their entire ecosystem within Bubble, and nothing against Bubble here, but I'm just like giving an example that the front end, the back end, the logic, everything was in that one place. So and this also applies to a typical sort of software situation, like when you're fully writing 100% code. I always tell people, never tightly couple your UI with your data. Kind of keep it separated, so because the UI frameworks will come and go.
Mm-hmm.
Today it's React, tomorrow it's whatever. But if you tightly couple your data with your front end, then you're in trouble because then you cannot easily swap your front end. So always, my advice is to always keep your API and the data layer sort of separate, and then the front end separate, so that you can do that swap when the time is right. So in this case, for example, so people had their data on Bubble and the front end on Bubble, so everything was tightly coupled there. But I think this is one thing that they could have done, is to sort of diversify and make sure maybe the data is in Airtable, or maybe the data is in another platform, or maybe the data is sort of abstracted in a way so that one thing, these tools are only being used for the front end or the user experience part of it. So that's sort of one thing that came to my mind right away when I saw this Bubble announcement. That okay, maybe people don't realize, because especially if you're not coming from a technical background, maybe you don't realize that nuance, that, or you haven't gone through the pain of migrating your front end to a new framework and what that entails when things are tightly coupled. So that's like one example that comes to mind.
We hear this a lot in around content and around social audiences, is that if you don't own the platform, then you're under control from the platform, right? And
right.
Even going back, way back in my like mobile freelancer days, we used something called Parse a lot. It was a really great way to back your mobile applications. Facebook bought it and then shut it down a year later. And we had a ton of clients that we had to migrate out of Parse because the data was in Parse and we had to pull it out.
Mm-hmm.
This gets messy at even different levels. I had a Google account that someone sent me money on, a friend of mine, for like, we went and got like a beer, and he gave me money. And they said, oh, that was because you're using it for a business case, and they shut it down. But I had that Google account attached to customer work. And so I lost my
Oh, wow.
ability to accept payments on behalf of Google.
Right.
If your data is in Firebase, which is a Google product, and God forbid, maybe you comment the wrong thing on a YouTube video, technically you could lose access to that. Now, I'm not saying that exact scenario has happened, but anytime that you're not in control of your data, your business's data, your customer's data, unfortunately, that means that you are at risk of getting hit with this. And so that Bubble example is fantastic. Like, you build your entire platform on Bubble, Bubble owns you if they want to.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's something that I've been thinking about a lot, because when you have your code, it's on your machine, it's on your systems, it's on your servers. You deploy to GCP, or you deploy to AWS, or you deploy in your own data center. You have kind of control over that. You can recreate that entire thing wherever. It's like you can literally lift and shift. But when you're tied to these platforms, that's definitely a thing to sort of watch out for how it's going to play out in the long run, because especially in the beginning, the tools are to get more people to sign up, to get more people to use your product, will have very like low tier pricing that's more affordable, maybe even like unlimited, for example, in this case. So how that's going to pan out over the next few years is something to definitely watch out for. How this community will evolve, like how the pricing for what's going to become the standard. At this point, I think people really understand what AWS and what to expect from AWS and GCP. But with no-code tools, there's like no standardization yet. Every tool has its own pricing structure, and how it's going to change over time will be interesting to watch. Maybe there will be a concept of you lock in a price for X amount of months or years. I don't know. So it's something to keep an eye on out for. And then the data piece also. Even if you decouple, even if your front end and back end is in a separate place, it's still somewhere. Your data is still somewhere. Do you have the ability to take it out? Right? Like, because if today you decide that, okay, I'm no longer going to be on this, can I easily take it out? Can I move it to another platform? And then the data design also is going to play a role in that. What's the shape of your data? Is it easy to extract and then move it to another platform? So those are we're getting in some nuanced things here. But I think a general sort of intro for everyone who's getting started with no code, especially as they are getting in that scale mode, some of these questions will have to be presented. That, okay, what are some things that you need to think about so that you're not in trouble down the road?
On the other hand, we're talking negatives, but on the other hand, all of the things that we're describing are, you could say, good problems to have too, right?
Yeah, growth problems.
Right. If you're getting to a point where Bubble is costing too much, you're probably in a place where you can afford to move off Bubble. There's nothing wrong with, it doesn't matter what you do. You're going to have to migrate at some point. If you are bringing on the world's best engineers and you are building a totally 100% scalable, no shortcuts, it's movable, it's migratable 100% from the start, you're going to spend a lot of money that you don't need to when you're 20 people on the software.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's always going to be trade-offs, and this applies to code or no code. Even if you're in the AWS GCP world, you are still facing the same problems, because I've seen firsthand companies trying to move from data center to the cloud without realizing how much the cloud costs, and then they have to cut back because we're using way too much, or we never paid attention to the processing powers before, and now all of a sudden it's costing us too much. So this is always going to be the case. Some things are just going to get highlighted after the fact. But if you are getting into that, as you said, in that those discussions, that means that you have growing pains, and which means that something is working, and now it's time to optimize. So yeah, as a citizen developer, like, who's just getting started, I won't worry too much about it. But if the focus should be on learning and sort of exploring the tools and just getting familiar with the ecosystem, but this is probably for startups who are trying to scale after a certain point.
We say no code as if that pushes away all of the engineering concepts, and you said something that I say all the time, which is there's trade-offs, and that's kind of, to me, that's like the mantra of engineers, right? Can I do this?
Right.
Yes, but there's trade-offs, right?
Right.
Um, just because something is no code, just because you don't have to know JavaScript to get it out the door, doesn't mean that it's no complexity. And in some
Hmm.
ways, unfortunately, for people who can't code, the whole reason code exists is because it's a really efficient way to define complexity, to describe and define complexity. And no code's great, but that complexity doesn't go away. And as your business and your product grows, you're going to get more and more. And that might be stuff that you have to express in a way that's no longer an efficient way to do it.
Right. I think I mentioned the other day in one of my posts that just because it's no code doesn't mean it's no programming. It's just that
Right.
you're not expressing it by writing code. You're just expressing it visually, but you still have to think about what the flow of information looks like. What are some of the decisions that you have to make as you get this data and you parse the data? So you still have to be pretty familiar with logic and some of these fundamental concepts of programming. But again, like I think a lot of it is abstracted. But the more detail you get, the more advanced features you try to develop. These will, inevitably come forward, and you will have to think about solving them with whatever tool you are using. Which and it's not bad. I mean, if you maintain that growth mindset, like if you have made it this far that you have something working, but now you want to add like an advanced use case, I say best way probably to learn is tag along with a developer. Like let them have you explain to like how the flow of information in this case could look like. Is it a loop, or is it just kind of like a if else? But if they can explain to you like how some of this works in code and then help you translate it to your tool of choice, I think that could be a really solid partnership. So I think the thing to highlight here is it's not code versus no code. It's not like no code is, yeah, I say no code is the future, but that doesn't mean code is going away. Of course not. And I think it's better probably for no coders to embrace people who do know how to code and use that as a leverage versus saying, no code is the future and we don't need the developers anymore. That's obviously not the case.
So for someone who is just dipping their toes into this world of no code, we talked earlier about that term has kind of gotten co-opted. I think nowadays you hear no code and you think bubble. But
Mhm.
the ecosystem is a lot larger than some of the big players who have lots of VC dollars behind them and can kind of try to capture this zeitgeist. If you were talking to someone who coming into the world of startups, they want to build this product, they want to validate their offer, they don't know which tool to use. They pull up this list. There's 20 no code tools that everyone says they got to try. What would be your advice for someone just entering this world?
Um, as you said, no code is synonymous with bubble for a lot of people. And I like to caution people against it a little bit. So I did this thing, 30 days of no code.
Hmm.
Like for 30 days, I just explored different tools. And one rule I had in there was that I'm not going to look at any kind of a guide. I'm not going to look at any documentation. I want to test them in a way, how far can I get without looking at any kind of documentation, right? So I wanted to see how intuitive they are. And I'm coming from a development background. So my take was, if I have to look up documentation, it's probably too complex.
Hmm.
And so when I did that, when I tried Bubble, I couldn't get very far right away, and I actually stopped it. I was like, this is going to take a little bit of time, so I'm going to put it on the back burner. I'm going to go around try some other tools, and that's when I realized that people don't have to start with something that complex, because I think it's a spectrum from no code all the way to code, and the closer in the spectrum you are to code, the more complex the tool is going to be,
Hmm.
right? And I think Bubble is on that cusp of, and they say themselves that Bubble is actually a kind of a programming language,
Hmm.
just a visual one. So it's right at the cusp of no code and code, or low code and code. So my advice to people is to start with something more simple. Especially if you're not from a development background, if you're not from a technical background, you will get overwhelmed pretty quickly if you start with something that complex.
Hmm.
So my recommendation is for people to start from scratch, like very, very basic tools, something like Glide, something like Adalo. Or if you don't even want to go that far, I recommend people To start with, there's actually a really powerful no-code tool on everyone's phone, especially if you own an iPhone. There's a shortcuts app on the iPhone. You could do a lot of stuff in there. Try to just build a shortcut for yourself. See, how this thing works. Like you have an idea in mind that when I open this app, I want something to happen. Try something like that. Get yourself familiar with this sort of concept of how you make the device do something for you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe do some kind of a basic automation in Zapier.
Mm-hmm.
Just try to connect, like when I get this email, I want something done here. Try something that simple. When you start to get familiar with just this basic concept of an input, some processing, and then output, you step to the next level, maybe build a simple app. Once you've done across that, then you sort of go into the more advanced categories. But jumping directly to that is going to kill motivation pretty quickly. Same thing that happens with people who try to learn to code and then they like fall off really quickly because they're like, it's too much.
The product that you want to build doesn't have to be the product that you educate yourself about a tool with either. And I would actually recommend avoiding that, because one of the problems that you're going to run into, even if you go hire, again, a team of just the most brilliant engineers on the planet, something that non-technical founders don't expect is that translating your ideas into something that's executable is difficult. It's a skill. And there's an entire industry, the entire product industry, product managers, product owners, that's these people's full-time jobs is doing that.
Right.
If you're trying to learn Bubble or whatever tool you pick, there's a good chance that as you're trying to think about your idea and translate that into Bubble, that you're going to actually run into issues in that translation process. So if you want to learn how to pick up one of these tools, find something in your day. We were moving a couple weeks ago, and I needed to, I wanted to make a tally of how many small, medium, large, and extra large boxes I need as I went through the house. And I was like, I've been wanting to check out this no code stuff. I'm gonna no code this app out. And so I can't even remember which one I used. It's a mobile first one, so I'll find it and I'll link it in the comments here. But I went in, and again, like I do this for a living as a programmer and a designer, and I got a version working pretty quickly. But then I wanted to there was something in the data model where I could get it to say, as a person, I have boxes, but I couldn't say, as a box, who do I belong to?
Right.
And and again, like, this is my job. I've done this this is my trade, like,
yeah.
I couldn't get it to do it. I couldn't get it to say, I'm a box and I belong to this person. So I had to go back and I had to completely redo the data model. And at that point I was like, you know what? I could have just coded this in Swift and had an actual app in my hand by now.
Right. Yeah, no, there's going to be those limitations. So I think what you said about sort of just thinking about how you're going to solve this problem, like just on a piece of paper, like, okay, what action does a user take? What happens in the back end? How am I helping? Like sort of making that picture a little bit clear before jumping into same thing as we do as developers, that don't write a line of code until you have already solved the problem on a piece of paper, until you know exactly what the approach you're going to take. Same thing applies here. Like solve it in a way where what do you want this to look like? What actions will the user take? What will happen in the back end? How is it going to help? Once you have that a little bit clear, then maybe you try a couple of tools and see which one is going to work best with the use case that you have in mind before trying to jump to a tool, because that's going to limit your creativity to what that tool is capable of.
I'll recommend here the practice of storytelling. And storytelling is something that we talk a lot about in product in terms of user stories, but we like to use them at a higher level too. Talk about that origin story. What is the user doing before they are introduced to this piece of software? Why are they holding it? Why are they playing on their laptop with it now? That's a story. Tell that story. What was the problem that brought them there? How is that problem going to get solved? Talk about the transformation story is another important one at a high level. I'm in the app. I have this transformation I want to achieve, this goal I want to get to. What am I doing? How do I get there? What are the steps I have to take? Write that out. Write that in text. You could use flowcharts. You don't have to sit down and Bubble and do this, right? Do this early.
No, absolutely not.
And then you can get
right
to the user story level, which is a thing we use in product a lot. But I don't even think you need to. If you have those first two stories, that origin story and that transformation story, now you know, okay, this is the outcome. this is the things they have to do. If you're telling a story and your character is suddenly at a place and they suddenly have a thing in their hand and no one knows how they got there or where that thing came from, you have a problem with your story. You have the same problem with your piece of software if you can't describe that.
Right. No, that's going to translate like right away. If it's not clear in your head what the transformation looks like, then the product is going to be a representation of just that. And but what you mentioned about like how you came up with an idea while you were moving is actually a great way, because a lot of times I've seen people say, "Oh, I don't know what to build," and the easiest way to solve that is to just kind of look around and observe like what in your day-to-day life is a problem that you could solve by if you had a tool, something that would make your life easier. You talked about boxes. I did this once with my like entire inventory in the house. Like it's so hard to keep a track of everything that I have. So I just did this with Airtable, and at this point, Airtable even has a UI. So that data model that I built years ago is still so applicable. And then I can now build a UI on top of it. I was so happy to see when Airtable released that interface designer that,
Hmm.
something that I was just maintaining in spreadsheets in Airtable is now all of a sudden, visible in an app type format. But that was a problem that I noticed as I was going about my life, and I tried to solve it with a no code tool. So that's always a great way, just kind of looking around, observing, what could you do to make your process a little bit more efficient.
Take note of anytime you reach for something, right? I'm a big pen and
Hmm.
paper guy. I've got notes right here that I've been working on as we chat, and
Right.
uh, note taking is an app, right? Anytime that
Hmm.
you reach for something in your day to day life, you're in the kitchen, you're at your desk, you're in your car. Is there a software version of what you're reaching for? Is there a software version
Hmm.
of the person that you need to call or text to get something done? Those are all really great
Hmm.
opportunities. When you have to interrupt your workflow for something else, that's a problem that you're
Absolutely.
solving.
100%.
Awesome, Sahil. So I want to talk specifically about you and about what you can offer to people who are entering this world of no code. First of all, I want to say anybody who's interested in learning more from Sahil, check out nocodecrashcourse.xyz. You can also find him on LinkedIn. Talk to me a little bit about the course. What sort of things can people expect to find there?
Yeah, so this is my first one in the no code space. I've done several others, good old code space. But I thought this was a good time to introduce people who are motivated, have ideas, but are limited by the fact that they don't know how to code. And I wanted to bring and put something together for that audience and introduce them to the world of no code. And I'm very conscious in this, in the fact that people might not know what all is entailed in developing a piece of software, right? So I want to give them that overview. Okay, what happens when an idea comes up? What does the software development lifecycle look like? What kind of steps you go through so that because all that is not technical. It's just your general know-how. But I want to give them that overview and then introduce them to a couple of tools that they can get started with, whether they're in a full-time job, whether they're thinking of building their own product, or if they just want to, as a hobby on the side, experiment. So I want to introduce them to these concepts and these tools so that they can go back and actually have a tangible outcome and start building stuff right away, whether that's automation or whether that's an app. So it's going to be sort of, as I said, it's a cohort-based course. So you'll have access to other people in the course in a community, and the idea is that when you leave after the week, you have enough knowledge that you can go back and start building and take these ideas from your day-to-day life and put them together in a piece of software.
Awesome. Well, again, if you're entering this world of no code, reach out to Sahil, check out the course. Um, super. I've been following Sahil on LinkedIn for a while, and even just follow him on LinkedIn because the wealth of knowledge in his posts and comments and stuff, you're going to learn a lot about no code. So if you have an interest in that world, definitely check him out on LinkedIn. Sahil, thank you so much for coming on. I learned a lot. This is a topic, again, I've been waiting to talk about. So I'm really glad that you came on and we talked about it. And we'll have you on again to as this world continues to develop. I'm sure there'll be more things for you to share in the future.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, this is just early days, and thank you so much again, for having me. It was a pleasure to discuss the world of no code, and yeah, hope to be back soon and share the latest updates.
Perfect. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you next week.